So playing Mazes and Minotaurs got me interested in the old versions of TSR. But it was really confusing, and there are a bunch of retro clones of TSR games like Labyrinth Lord, but it's very confusing the differences between the retro clone and the actual game and the games that I actually played and the versions I didn't. It got to be really confusing. Labyrinth Lord was really popular at the time. There was Osric, but Labyrinth Lord was really hard for me to get hold of a physical copy of. It's easier now, which is why I got this. Blueholm really excited me when I heard about it, but it took too long for me to get it, so I had moved on by the time this came out. So I pretty much stuck with first edition. First edition I liked better. It was more fun than second edition. Second edition was not so bad when it first came out. When it first came out, I liked it more. I completely converted over to second edition D&D, but it was easier when it first came out, and if somebody wanted to play a weird kit that was not in the book you had, you could say, well, I don't have the book. But now all that stuff's online, and so second edition is a lot harder to run than it used to be. But first edition, I could do it from memory. So I was pretty much stuck with first edition until I came across this, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which I was not that enthused about because the name was a bit of a turnoff for me. But when I finally looked at it, it was the game I know with a few changes that I might have done if I'd thought of it first. So it's available for free if you get the version with no art. And so here you can see, and by no art, I mean they just took the art out. They didn't reformat it for no art. So there's blank spaces where the art should be. So, but it's free. And so if you're playing with children, you might want to take the free version, but I'm going to show you the one with art because it's better looking. So on the inside cover, they have the price list, but it's white print on red, which makes it hard to read. But you can just print those pages out. Now, this picture there was an earlier version of these rules. This company, at first, they published stuff for old school, just generic for Osric, which is basically first edition, or Labyrinth Lord. But somebody told them, well, you could sell more games if you had your own system. So they made their own system. And it's pretty much the TSR game with a few changes. And this was on the cover of the original version of their Lamentation rules. So the ability score modifiers are united. There's just one set of modifiers for every ability score. They don't have separate ones like first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons has. But they're the same modifiers I know. It was not a big change for me. One thing that was not in the book, but was in an issue of the Dragon, was the idea that there's a minimum number of hit points. But most people would give you maximum hit points at first level. Some people who are really hardcore would make you roll. And I can understand their point. A person with one hit point tends to survive longer than one with maximum hit points at first level because having maximum makes you overconfident, and you don't realize at first level a single swipe of a sword could kill you. So it doesn't matter how many hit points you got, but here they give you a minimum roll. And most characters, it's 4 hit points is the minimum. Fighters, it's 8. Magic users, it's 3. So the classes are pretty much the classes I know. One thing different about this is it's on a silver standard for the prices. So 1 gold piece equals 50 silver pieces, which equals 500 copper pieces. So the classes. The classes I know. There's clerics, which in this variation have 6-sided hit dice, but they start with spells at first level, like first edition. Some of the TSR variants of the game, you didn't get spells until second level for clerics. There's a fighter class, which in this game has 8-sided hit dice. And every class is unique. They can do one thing that no other class can do. So for fighters are the only ones whose attack bonus increases as they advance in levels. Everybody else is just +1 to hit. And clerics and magic users have completely different spells. Dispel Magic is the only spell that's in both their lists. So there's magic users. One change is at first level they have 6-sided hit dice, but after that they have 4-sided. Now, thieves are the ones who are most changed by this game. That thieves have been replaced with something called specialists, and the skills have been changed a little. Hide in shadows and move silently have been combined as one skill called stealth. Tinker is a combined open locks and disarm traps skill. Sleight of hand is pickpockets. Search is both search for traps and other searching things you might need to do. Search for secret doors. Languages is a skill here. You're playing in Europe, people are multilingual. There's a chance you might know the language of people you run into. Climb skill, and bushcraft is like the ranger skills, things like climbing trees, hiding in the bushes, tracking, things like that. And architecture is the dwarf skill. Finding the sliding wall panel, finding the pit trap. But I also allow it to be used for climbing bordered walls. It's the dwarf skill. So the skills are done differently in this variation. They're rolled on a d6. So you start with 4 skill points that you can add to your 1 in 6 chance, and each level you go up, you add 2. But all these skills, a 1 in 6 chance, every class can do that. So clerics are the only ones who can do cleric spells. Magic users are the only ones who can do magic user spells. Specialists are the only ones who can improve their skills. So then we have dwarves. What's unique about dwarves is that they have the most hit points. They have 10-sided hit dice, and they have the second best saving throws. And the architecture skill they can improve. That's the dwarf skill. Now, elves might be considered the only multi-class. Some of the different maneuvers that fighters can do, elves can do, but they don't improve and roll in their chance to hit like fighters do. They have 6-sided hit dice, and they require more experience to go up than a magic user does. And they start with fewer spells in their spell book, but they have the search skill, which they can improve. And they also are good at not being surprised. So halfling are the best at making saving throws, and they have the bushcraft skill. So halflings are the rangers of this variation of the game. As it turns out, James Raggi, who invented this variation of the game, did not like Tolkien. He did not like dwarves, elves, or halflings. He only put them in here to make his games more compatible with other people who are used to playing TSR variations of the game. He also doesn't like clerics and has increasingly moved away from clerics in his games. So armor types, there's like 3 kinds of armor: leather, chain, and plate. And everybody can wear leather armor, even magic users. Chainmail and plate are less useful for magic users and elves. There are a few named weapons that are listed here, but most weapons fit into melee weapons fit into general categories: minor, small, medium, and great. And the prices are listed. There's a different price whether you buy something in the city or in a rural area. In a rural area, some things are not available, and when you're creating a character, you get to pick the best price. But after that, it depends on where you are, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. And here's the missile weapons, and the longbow has a really long range, so that makes it a more useful thing. Also, the crossbows can negate some of your armor. A heavy crossbow negates more than a light crossbow, but they're slower to reload than they are in D&D. Here's some more of the equipment that you can get, and more. Yeah, 4 pages of equipment seems a lot, but a lot of it's because of this page is a lot of explanation about things. So it goes into the rules, and they're pretty much the rules that you know from. It's not that different. Encumbrance is a bit different. It's a pretty simple encumbrance system, so you can run it. There's some maritime rules. But some people think there are too many rules for sea, but you know, if you want to do a pirate campaign, you want these rules. The retainer rules are a lot simpler and easier to understand than the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules. Some of them have a daily wage. Some of them, most of them have a monthly wage. And some of them have a different wage if you provide them a place to live, and there's a space requirement. Some of them require a share of the treasure in order to hire them. And of these, the most useful ones are the scholars, which help with spell research, and the alchemists, which help with potion creation. So your characters, if they get too much treasure, they can invest it, in which case it could grow. Throughout the artwork in this book, there's a group of characters that appear, and these characters do awful, bloody things to other people, and sometimes they have awful stuff happen to them. So this one here, the redhead, is the fighter. There's a blonde one who I think is a specialist, and a brunette who's a magic user. So it goes into combat, the combat rules here. Yeah, in this case, she loses the fight. So there's a lot of artwork created by this person, or at least in this style, if it's not the same person, that is often used once, ever, for the catalog at a particular convention. And some of this has been collected in the book. of the, so you can see it, but others, you know, it's appeared once and never again. Now I'm going to skip the most controversial page, so you'll buy the book for yourself. Anyway, so it goes a bit into the explanation of spells and research and magic users and their spells and research. And they have a pretty standardized, simple way to research spells. So, and one of the things that's different about this variation of the game is that any magic user, even a first level one, if he has enough money and time, can research any spell and put it in his spell book. And once it's there, he can make potions and scrolls from that spell. So it's theoretically possible you could research Disintegrate, which is a 6th level spell, while you're still first level. And then you can make scrolls of Disintegrate, and then you can carry them in the dungeon and use Disintegrate. So, but having your own library helps with spell research. It's twice as expensive if you try to do it without a library. Having a scholar decreases the time that it takes to do the research. Having a laboratory is necessary to cast the spell Identify or to make potions, and having an alchemist makes that process faster. As I said earlier, the spells are divided between the cleric and magic user class. They're all unique. And so one of the things that's different is Heat Metal, which was a druid spell, is now a cleric spell. There's no druids in this variation of the game. And magic users, Fairy Fire, another druid spell, is now a magic user spell. So most of these are the spells I know. There's a few unique ones that are added, and they're really cool, like Howl of the Moon turns you into like a fake werewolf, so the Scooby Gang can bust you. But most of them are just spells that you already know. And the little descriptions of the spells has this head at the bottom, and if you flip the pages, you can see it decompose. Turn Undead is a cleric spell, so you can turn undead as many times as you memorize that spell. There's some interesting variations of the spells in here. For example, Mirror Image, if you cast that, it doesn't call up 1d4 illusions. It calls up 1d4 versions of yourself from other dimensions. So that's a cool modifier. And you know all those summon spells, Monster Summoning 1, Monster Summoning 2, etc.? All those are combined into a spell called Summon. And it's a first level spell, and it doesn't summon like a dog or even a demonic dog. Instead, it summons an eldritch horror, which you can see the categories of what form it takes, and it might have one of these powers. And the more higher level you are, the better you are at casting the spell. And it's possible that you might just break the world by casting the spell. You could cause the end of the world by casting the spell. It's unlikely, but it's possible. So that's a really cool spell that players want as soon as they can get that. Now, in the appendix, there's a glossary, and then there's firearms. The default world for Lamentations of the Flame Princess is 17th century Earth. Earth during the time of Pirates of the Caribbean, the time of the 30 Years' War, the time of the English Civil War. It's a time when it was the worst possible time to be alive. There was nowhere you could go in the world where people weren't doing really horrible stuff to each other. So the worst monsters are humans, and firearms were starting to be a thing. So there's pistols, arquebuses, and muskets, plus the stuff to work them. There's some unique armor things. And so here, guns were matchlocks at first, and later they had flintlocks. So it depends on where your campaign is setting as to which you have. And basically, the way guns work in Lamentations is the rules put a time frame on it, but basically you can fire them once per combat. So you fire your gun, and then you draw your sword and you have a melee fight. And the guns negate most armor. In order to have any kind of armor protection at all against somebody with a gun, you're going to have plate mail and a shield. Plate mail's not enough. So, and when you shoot a gun, the other side is to make a morale roll because of the noise of the gun. But also, when you fire the gun, it might misfire. So, firearms is one of the things it has. Nice picture there. And then the character sheet has a really simple encumbrance system. And the back, it has a lot of the stuff that you would look up in the course of play. But it's all in white print on red, which is hard to read. And I wish that Mazes and Minotaurs had a printable DM screen, referee screen, because that would make things a lot easier. So there you have it. The Rules and Magic Player Handbook for Lamentations of the Flame Princess.